Hello again, and welcome to another episode of Pitt Panthers Weekly. My name's Jason. I'll be your host for the next half hour as we get into some Pitt Panthers basketball, also some football. Once again, I want to, proudly say that the Arsenal Cider House is our sponsor for this show each and every week. They have three great locations, one in Wexford, one in South Hills at the Trax Farm location, and of course their original out in or downtown in Lawrenceville. They are Western Pennsylvania's first cidery, and I will tell you, because we're normally there on location, the last two episodes have not been. It's been a lot more difficult with the games during the week to get out there. So, but we will be back on site. I should be next week, so we'll be excited for that. Also, we're going to be doing some giveaways, so please dial in and remember, we'll be doing a trivia question starting next week, so the winners of that will get a free gift from the Arsenal Cider House. Let's move right into the basketball team, the men's basketball team. They suffered yet another loss yesterday to Georgia Tech. There's been some announcements this week. There's been, they played Duke earlier in the week. I was at that game. It was a nice crowd. There was a lot of Duke fans, but there's a lot of Duke fans in that crowd, whether that's now or that is, 10 years ago, when Pitt was at its, I would say at or near its peak. So, it really didn't matter how many were there and how many weren't or whatever. It was still a good crowd. And for those of you who can tell the difference between my voice now and the way it normally is, I apologize, dealing with a little flu bug, so you're just bear with me a little bit. Like I said, let's climb on into this. Pitt got off to a... They struggled. They struggled out the gate against Duke. I think they were a little overwhelmed. I think they were a little, and they were awestruck, to be honest. I firmly believe it. The five kids they had on the floor, even though they're their best five, I think they were a bit awestruck. And that was the moment that's the game where you start Jared Wilson Frame. He has... right now the most playing experience of any of the players Pitt has, with Ryan Luther, and that was one of the announcements this week. With Ryan Luther out for the remainder of the season, he's looking for a medical red shirt. With that being the case, it is extremely difficult and to expect those kids to pick up the ball and just be able to do and fill in for them. They don't have an experienced player to bring the ball up, to dish and whatnot. All that's fallen on Marcus Carr right now. They do have a senior in Jonathan Milligan that can do that, but he struggles mightily against pressure. He does not handle the ball well. He does not distribute the ball well, and he doesn't take enough shots himself, even when they're open. When he was first recruited, it was easy to, everybody was excited about his, him coming into the program, but he has honestly never panned out, and that can be for an abundance of reasons, but he really has not panned out, and that leaves them with five freshmen. I mean, a whole team full of freshmen, but five freshmen really starters, and those include Shamil Stevenson, Marcus Carr, Terrell Brown, Cam Davis, and the likes of those kids. And it is really difficult to ask 2, 3, and 4-star kids to go out there and perform against a team like Duke. Duke coming off of 2 losses where they didn't shoot well. And Duke's got a really young team themselves, really young team. Grayson Allen being their senior is always on the floor, though. So that's having him as a floor general is perfect for them because he actually takes all the pressure off the rest of the team. Then you've got players like Bagley and Carter. Bagley, Coach Stallings mentioned that he thinks he's might be one of the best freshmen he's ever seen. I got into a discussion, with somebody on Twitter, and it's never good for me to go down these roads. I go into these rabbit holes, and I never come out. I always come out dirty. But somebody was complaining about, the how different our freshmen look compared to theirs. Well, that's the difference between 2, 3, and 4-star kids and NBA kids. They have 5 guys that are going to be drafted. They have essentially 5 starters on that team that are going to be drafted into the NBA in the first couple of rounds. That's substantial. I don't care how you look at it or where you look at it. It is them and Kentucky that do this year in and year out. They get the best freshmen in the country, and they start them, and these kids all, leave school immediately after 1 year. Grayson Allen, of course, will probably go in the top couple of rounds, but he's a senior. He's like the one guy that stands out on that team. So it does make a difference. The talent level does make a difference, but that's not to say Pitt doesn't have talent. But they struggled in that game against Duke. They struggled mightily in that game against Duke. They finally were starting to get their feet under them a bit late in the first half, early in the second half. The first 7-8 minutes, they played pretty well in that second half. And late in that first half, they put together a little run. They were able to get a 20, 25, 30-point lead down to 18 and a chance to go further. But they just, they didn't have enough. They just didn't have enough. And no, Ryan Luther, having him in there does not make all the difference in the world. But to sit here and say that he wouldn't have made any difference, well, that's ludicrous. But he's not the difference in them being 0 with their record of 0-5 as opposed to, would they have all those losses? They might have a win, maybe 2, if Ryan Luther's in there. But they're not beating the likes of Duke. They're not beating the likes of Miami and some of these other teams that they're going to play coming up in the schedule. They travel. The next 5 games are all against ranked teams. Syracuse, Duke again, and so on and so forth. So the fact is there's just not enough there right now, and they're just not old enough. They don't have enough playing experience. They just don't know how to do it yet. They're learning. They go through 5, 10, and 15-minute stretches in these games right now, playing very well. But then, they struggle otherwise. They struggle in those other situations. And that's tough. That's tough because you can't... And when they struggle, it's the dry spells that hurt them. They go through 5, 10, and sometimes we've gone as long as 12 minutes of no points. And when you go that long with no points, you just cannot hold a team down. You can hold a bad team down or a low-level mid-major down. You have a chance to do that. But you can't do that against a Duke, a Miami, Georgia Tech, who played them yesterday. Pitt had that, they were losing 20-1 to start the game, and at one point they had to lead down to 6 or 7 points. It was like 27-21. They were right back in the game. But those kids, they start, they get to doing the things that they should do and they know how to do, but then they start playing outside of themselves again and trying to do more than they're capable of. And that's one of the teaching processes. That's one of the learning processes that Coach Stallings has to live through right now, and that is staying within yourself at all points. They do that enough to get back into a game.
But then, because they're feeling it and feeling that momentum and feeling that excitement, it leaves them again. They start turning the ball over, which is exactly what they did yesterday. They turned the ball over way too much. After they had gotten themselves back in the game, they had started turning the ball over time and time again. And in the second half, it started out the same exact way, turning the ball over time and time again. The Georgia Tech had driven their lead that was 10 points or 10 or 11 points. They drove their lead out to 17, 18, 19 points. And then Pitt went on their own little run, drew it back to 10 or 11. And then they went literally, I think the stretch was, 7 minutes without a bucket. It just cannot happen. But it's going to happen because they're young. I was watching because I was not able to be there yesterday, unfortunately. I did watch the press. I watched the game. I covered it from home. I watched the game. I watched the press conference afterwards. And to see the Pitt fans just hammer away at Stallings is just hysterical. I mean, it's hysterical. I don't know what people thought. I don't know what people expected. Fact of the matter is this, though. Whether he was here or somebody else, this is the type of team he was going to have. This is the type of team he was going to have. They would have had one other returning player of value, and that was Cam Johnson. They had so many other kids that had transferred in that, that left or were going to leave. New kids, young kids that didn't have any experience, like that were going to be counted on. So regardless what's said or how it was said or whatever, what you're seeing this year is kind of what you were going to get regardless who took over. It wasn't going to be easy. And I'm not sure where, the average, or I don't know. I don't understand the thought process that they deserve, a Pitt fan or any fan base deserves the best coach in America to come step up for them. There are a lot of good coaches. Coach Stallings was one of them. He's very well respected in the coaching community. I have called and done and gotten some opinions offline. And I'm not going to bring up who, but I have called more than a handful of Division I coaches, and I have called some Division II coaches. And I have asked the question, what are your thoughts on on Kevin Stallings? And they all say the same thing. They all say the same thing. And some say, well, that's that fraternity. They're going to stick up for each other. I don't think so. I don't think they're going to stick up for each other. There's, just for the sake of doing it, there's nothing in it for them. There's nothing. Something else I took out of the Duke, excuse me, bumping the mic. Something else I took out of the Duke game, the press conference with Mike Krzyzewski was very telling. He did not come in there and just spew about, how good Kevin Stallings is and how good this program was and how good it'll be later. I mean, he did not come in and sing praises like that. His team was coming off of 2 straight losses, and what he wanted to see them do was respond in this game. And they did. They responded in a huge way. They jumped out to a 7-0 lead and didn't turn back. They controlled the boards. They did everything they were supposed to do. Their talent won over one in every facet, which is exactly what he teaches them to do. But he had mentioned the very first question was extremely benign. And please follow us on dystpittsburgh.com. I wrote about this, and I know I was the only one who mentioned it. But I spoke to another media member afterwards as we were walking to our cars. He felt the same way from this comment, although I'm fairly certain I'm the only one who wrote about this. The very first question was asked, very benign. It was asked, do you, Coach Krzyzewski, what did you say to the Pitt players when you were walking through the line, the handshake line? And Coach Krzyzewski just kind of looked at him and chuckled a bit and said, "Good game," that sort of thing. And you thought as if he was going to take it for granted and just blow it off, but he didn't. He expanded on it, and when he expanded on it, it was telling, very telling what he said. He said, I don't know if it's just too, I take after my mother, or, if it was my upbringing. He's like, but I shake hands with every kid. I like all the kids that we play against, and I shake hands with every kid and I give them their moment. They deserve that. He's like, no kids deserve a blow-by. Now, when he said that, he didn't have to go there at all. He had there was nothing in it for him to go there. But Pitt their former coach, Jamie Dixon, was the absolute king of the blow-by. That's what he did. That's what he did, and that's what he does. I had written, when I wrote the post about Mike Krzyzewski, one of the things that you get from his conferences, more than any others, whether you like him or not, and to be honest, there isn't a ton of reason to dislike him. He coaches the right way. He gets good players. They don't cheat. He's just that good a coach. He's just that good a recruiter, and he built a program. He built an amazing program, and that's how he does it. But when you listen to him, you hear the class in which he works with, the class in which he carries himself with. And it isn't just the building of that program and how it's the class in which he carries himself, which allows him to also go out and get those good kids. Class matters. People wondered why the recruiting slowed down at Pitt. Well, I think, they had a lot of changeover with their assistant coaches, and those assistants were doing a ton of the recruiting. Jamie's not all that good of a recruiter. He never was. He's good at getting those 2 and 3 star kids and turning them into good, solid defensive players. But he's really bad at high-end talent. He doesn't know how to develop it. He never really did. He can make a so-so to a good player, turn him into a really good player. But a really good player, he does very little with. He just doesn't have those tools in his toolbox. And his assistants here, there towards the end, didn't either. Everybody complained, well, why didn't they give Brandon Knight a chance? Well, please tell me what great point guards and guards did he recruit there, in the last couple of years. I want to know, because when Dixon left and Brandon Knight was not given the reins, can somebody tell me what guards were left to play? Because there weren't any. The one kid that was left, or ended up, Jamal was one of their best players last year, and he was a senior, and he was miscast because they didn't have an option. They didn't have anybody else to put in. Jamie Dixon, the last of the really good point guards left when James Robinson left. Now, move into now. Now you have Coach Stallings, who, by and large, the fan base is upset with. I don't get it, only because he wasn't a sexy pick when he came in here. He came in an inauspicious type of manner, in the fact that the media did not perform well at that press conference. The former athletic director still gets French fried on social media and in public locally because of the hire. Fact is, he's a good coach. Was he the best option? He might not have been the best option, but for Pitt fans to sit here and think that Sean Miller was going to come here and coach, they're crazy. If they think for a second that they were going to get a top 25 or top 20 coach to come here, leave their current university and come to Pitt, what were they thinking? And what are you thinking to think that that's the case? And to go out and get an up-and-comer, that's tough. You got to dig. That is a ton of digging, and they've got to agree to it. None of those up-and-comers want to come to a program that had that such a stretch of great play, but then did not have the kids to continue that play in a brand new conference. Nobody wanted to come to that. No one. Coach Stallings knows how to play offense. He knows how to teach it. So, is this are these podcasts built around supporting him? No, because after 4 or 5 years, if the kids don't respond and they don't do well, this group of kids that he's got and the 2 or 3 that were recruited from last year that cannot play this year because they were transfers and whatnot, if these kids don't respond after 2 or 3 years, then yes, then it's a failure. But it is not a failure until that point. You cannot look at his first full year of his players and determine that it is a failure, because it is not. It's not. The kids that they have here right now are playing hard for him, and they want to play for him. They love their coach. And in turn, he proves how much he loves them because he backs their play at every turn. He throws himself under the bus at every turn, which is very much unlike anything he did last year to the team, to that group of players that did not want to play for him, that did not care. So, with that said, it is what it is. We'll move on. So, as I said, Pitt did lose 2 more games this week. They're an 0 in the ACC. They're going to struggle. They're going to struggle for a long time. In this year, I should say, not a long time, just this year, I believe. Especially with Luther out. Luther's now out. They're hoping to get him back next year. And if he is able to come back, which by all accounts it sounds like that's going to be the case. If he is able to come back, they're going to have some. These kids are going to be a year older, much more experienced. They've got some junior college kids that are coming over that could not make it, or some transfers, I should say, from other programs that couldn't step in and play right away. And they're talented. And that doesn't include the fact that they have Kingsby and a couple other kids, Dansby, and a couple other kids that were recruited that are big time, that are big time players. Once the influx of those players comes in, you've got Luther coming back, who is going to be a big piece for them underneath. Then you've got all those younger bigs that they have now, Terrell Brown and Kenny Chukwuka, and some of these other guys who will have a year of development under them. Once you pile all of that together, you have the makings of a much better team next year. Now, is it a team that's going to go to an NCAA tournament and compete for a national championship? Probably not. Probably not, but they're going to be way more competitive than they are this year. And unfortunately, it's trial by fire this year for these kids. They have to do this. But the continued recruiting is happening. He's bringing in 4-star recruits to look at this team. And these guys that are coming in know they have a chance to play early. And not because of the lack of talent, just because if they are just a touch better than some of the 3-star kids or 2-star or whatever they've got that are starting right now because they don't have the depth, then guess what? They've got a shot of playing. They got a shot of turning things around and showing, wow, look what this guy did, and improving themselves in a big way. So I don't think things are nearly as bleak as people think. Most Pitt fans are delusional. They truly believe that they deserve something. They deserve a winning team, a team to compete for a championship year in and year out. That's just not the case. Nobody deserves that. They just get it from certain programs in the country, and most other ones don't. So It's time to come back to reality and back the team that's in front of you instead of beating them up in social media and in every avenue that you can, because quite honestly, it's not helping the team. It's not helping the program. And getting rid of your coach right now would cause more harm than good, because as these young kids are here, they were recruited by him. They want to play for Coach Stallings. They don't want to play for the next guy. So keeping what you have in place is an important thing right now. On the football front, let's transition over to that. On the football front, it's important to talk about the fact that the team lost their defensive coordinator, Conklin, but they went out and got Randy Bates from Northwestern. Randy Bates was the linebacker coach at Northwestern. He was hired by Pat Fitzgerald. Randy Bates, prior to that, was the defensive coordinator at Louisiana Tech. Did a nice job down at Louisiana Tech, but then he became the linebacker coach at Northwestern and has developed some talent there. That defense has gotten better and better, and it's because of that linebacker play. He's a good coach. He's a really good coach, and he's considered one of the top 5 or 10 recruiters in the country at that level. So important. It was an important hire, and it was a really good hire. His playing days were at The Ohio State University. He was a good player there. So there's an Ohio connection for Coach Narduzzi. Once again, important that he sticks with what he knows and who he knows. Because for him, it's all about consistency and building a program. He recently signed a long-term contract himself, but the bulk of that contract was built around getting more money in place to hire another assistant and also to retain the good ones that he has. I was never a big fan of Conklin. Not that he was bad. I just was never a huge fan of his. The fact that they went out and got a guy who's done this before and has coached and big conferences like the ACC. Actually, the Big Ten is right there. It's important. It's important. He's from Ohio. His playing days were in Ohio. He's coached in the conference, so he knows the area too, and that's an important thing for them also. There was also news that came out that they retained Ronaldo Hill, even though he was being, that's their secondary coach, even though he was being chased by several programs. That's important. That's important. Although many of you can sit there and say, "Oh, well, their secondary wasn't very good." Well, actually, they developed a couple of really good players, and kids that are going to get playing time in the NFL. And one kid just left early. One kid played to his senior year and was good. Now, he's picked on, but he was good. So he knows how to develop talent. He knows how to do it. The fact that they were able to retain him is fantastic. And it shows where the program is going. The negativity's getting old, and you're not going to get it here. You're just not going to get it here. I'm going to be as positive as I can, because it just, from my standpoint, it's important to be positive, because it is a better story from all points if this team is good. If these teams are good, then the stories are good. If they struggle, then the stories by nature are negative, and everything's negative. So finding good in whatever you can is important. But you don't have to look hard with what the football team has done. And to be honest, if you take a good hard look at the basketball team, you don't have to look hard there either. There's some good players there. They're young, and that's what they're going to struggle with. I appreciate everybody who dials in each and every week. It was another good show. We should be on site for our next one at the Arsenal Cider House in the South Hills at Trax Farms in the very back of the building. It is a fantastic location. They always have the best stuff brewing, and I'm still finishing up the cinnamon apple from the holidays. So I'm excited to be back there, and we'll be doing, as I said, another great. We'll be doing giveaways each and every week beyond that point. So dial in, let me know you listened. Send us a message and answer the questions as they come, because I can't wait to start doing this. There'll be Pitt trivia questions, and we'll be testing the fan base a bit. All right. Once again, it's the Pitt Panthers Weekly Show presented by Arsenal Cider House. They have 3 great locations. We appreciate y'all listening, and we'll see you next week.
Communicate across the sky until you hear the message sent.